What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, I'm going to run through a wildcard draft for Game Week 19. If you've not used your first wildcard yet, this is the final week to use it. So I thought I would throw together a quick video. Because of the quick turnaround between Game Weeks 18 and 19, I'm not giving this as much thought as I usually would. I wanted to put that out there straight away. But I think a lot of the places in your wildcard draft almost pick themselves. So hopefully this will be quite useful to you if you're using the chip. If it is, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already. Let's get into it. So let's start off with the defensive players. In goal, I've gone for Alisson in the main 11 and Valdemarson on the bench. So Valdemarson is a 3.9 million goalkeeper. I'm not necessarily expecting Flecken to be out for a long time, but I also don't think it's a guarantee that Fabianski will keep Areola out of the team when he's back. So I'd just rather go for the guy that's a little bit cheaper to have more funds to spend elsewhere. And also, even when we have to start thinking about bench boost, you've still got your second wildcard to use anyway. So to get two playing goalkeepers shouldn't be too much of a concern later on. With Alisson, I've also got two other Liverpool players. So I've got a Liverpool triple up. If you've got your triple captain left still, I don't think it's that much of an issue going for Alisson because you'll probably want to play it in that double game week that Liverpool will have alongside Everton. If you've not got your triple captain and you think you might want to use your assistant manager chip quite early on, which may well be a viable way to play it, then maybe instead of Alisson, you can just go for Pickford instead. But it's probably one of those two goalkeepers that I would pick. In the defence, Munoz is pretty much nailed on in any wildcard draft, I imagine. Very cheap, nailed on, right wing back, super attacking, good fixtures. He's definitely in. I've also got Trent for that double game week later on. I think he's worth paying the extra cash for over someone like Van Dijk. And I've also kept Gabriel. So I've got one Arsenal defender, the most attacking of the lot, absolutely nailed on. I don't think you necessarily need to keep Gabriel on your wildcard draft. You could look to go a bit cheaper. But I like still having one Arsenal defender in there. I think long term, they'll keep enough clean sheets. He'll get enough attacking returns. He'll still be worth the money. And then on the bench is Mykolenko. So because I've got Alisson in goal, I've gone for a different Everton defender because I don't have Pickford. He's not someone that you're going to use that often until the double, but because you're wildcarding, you can set yourself up so that you've got him ready for later on. Plus, he's super cheap at 4.3 million. And then I've gone for Anderson at Fulham, who's 4.2. I don't see any point in going for the really cheap 4 million defenders. None of them are that good anyway. And for a little bit extra, you get a much better option that you can use in particular game weeks where you might need them. So Mykolenko, game week 24, Leicester at home, plus a potential double in 25. Anderson has Ipswich at home in game week 20 when Munoz has got Chelsea at home. So it works quite nicely. I think if I was wildcarding this week, I'd have at least 4 of those defenders. It's just whether you go Gabriel or someone cheaper, or you go Alisson versus Pickford in goal. Just on Anderson, if you want to go for the more attacking player from Fulham, it's definitely Castagna. But I think minutes in the long term are much more secure with Anderson, whereas when Tete is back, it's possible that Castagna might come out of the team. But honestly, there's not really much in it either way. So if you want to go for Castagna, that seems pretty good too. So in midfield, I've kept both Cole Palmer and Mo Salah in the squad. I don't think that really needs too much explaining. Over the next few game weeks, one of those two players is likely to be your captain most weeks. And for a lot of people at the moment, it's just permanently captaining Salah. In the future, maybe you'd look to move on to other premium players. But with Son not being all that consistent, Saka out injured, and Haaland just feeling like too much money, I don't see Salah or Palmer going anywhere for quite a while. I've also gone for Sarr at Crystal Palace as the cheaper option versus Eze. His minutes have been really good recently. In the short term, I don't expect that to change. I still think in the long term, it's possible that Eze will become the better option. But right now, there's not a huge amount to say that will definitely be the case. And Sarr is obviously cheaper at 5.8 million. One thing to keep in mind when you're building your Wildcard 19 team is your team value might be more than mine. I've got Isak in this draft. I've had to pick him up at 9.1 million. You may well have got him at 8.4, 8.5. You might have more money to spend. Either way, at 5.8 million, I think Sarr is great value. And for me, a much better pick than the likes of Enzo or Ahmad or someone like that. So I think he's worth paying the extra for. In the other two midfield spots, I've gone for Rodgers on the bench. Now, personally, I picked him up at 5 million. If you were buying new, and because he's on 4 yellow cards, potentially you could look at Enzo or Ahmad instead. But I think Rodgers has got the minutes. He started every single game for Villa this season. He's playing as a number 10 mostly, if not off the left. And I just think the fixtures are pretty good long term. So Rodgers would stay for me. But if you wanted to go Ahmad or Enzo instead, or even a Iwobi, I don't mind those picks, but I don't think any of them are necessarily better than Rodgers. So if you got Rodgers cheap, I would keep him in your squad. And then I've got Anthony Gordon as my final midfield pick. I don't think that Man United away and Spurs away on paper is necessarily great, but I don't think anyone is worried about playing attackers versus those defences. And long term, the fixtures are pretty good. That's why, with the likes of Isak, the boat hasn't been missed because the long term fixtures for Newcastle are decent. I do have 0.7 in the bank. You might have even more money to put your squad together. You could look to go for someone like Odegaard. You might want to go for a Son if you're really loaded in terms of money. Or maybe you just want to leave a spot to get Bruno Fernandes back. I think in midfield, that's the one spot where I'm not completely sure who I would go for. Palmer, Salah, Sarr, pretty straightforward. I think Rodgers, okay, you could go for one of the other enablers instead, but I think Rodgers is fine. It's that Anthony Gordon position that I'm not quite 100% certain that is who I would go for, but I don't think there's necessarily another standout. I don't particularly like the other Liverpool midfielders because they're not nailed on to start. Plus, I've already got a triple up anyway. It's not the right time to buy in Burma or Bowen. You know, you could look at someone like Martinelli maybe from Arsenal. I just think Gordon is pretty consistent in terms of starts and minutes. And with those good fixtures, that's probably someone I would look to include. And then I probably had the toughest time picking my 3 forwards, and I'm still not completely sure about 2 of them. So I'll talk through what my thought process is. So I've gone Solanke, João Pedro, and Isak. Isak, like Salah and Palmer, probably doesn't need a huge amount of explaining. In terms of forwards right now, there's not a huge amount of standouts, but Isak is definitely one of them. So he would be included absolutely. Then with Solanke and João Pedro, it really depends on how much extra money you have to spend. Like if you've got better team value than me, you could go something like Isak, Solanke, Mateta, or that Mateta spot could be Jackson or Watkins, depending on how much money you've got spare. I definitely don't mind going without João Pedro, but if you're stuck for cash, I still like him as a good value player moving forward. Under 6 million, I think he's the best option, and I like having that play-in option there rather than going for a dud forward like Stewart at Southampton instead, who's not going to get a huge amount of minutes. So absolutely, if you've got the cash to upgrade João Pedro, that is what I would do. But if you need a value pick around 6 million, he's still the one that I would go for despite his run of bad results recently, right? He's had hardly any returns. I think it's 1 assist in 5 or 6 game weeks at this point. And then with Solanke, it's a similar situation. I think Wolves at home, Newcastle at home, next 2 are pretty good. Then you've got Arsenal away and Everton away, which is a bit tougher. But then the fixtures longer term aren't bad for Spurs either. He always plays in a team that does often create a lot of... let me get that right. Does often create a lot of chances. And at 7.5 million, he's pretty decent value. But again, if you've got money to have Isak, João Pedro and Jackson instead, that might be something to look at. On Solanke versus Mateta, because Mateta has Southampton at home and Leicester away in the next 3 game weeks, you could argue he's a better short-term punt. But in terms of non-penalty expected goals per 90, there's not really much of a contest between Solanke and Mateta. Solanke does get more opportunities to score, and that is why I prefer having him in. So I think if I had a lot of money to spare with this draft, I'd be looking at maybe doing João Pedro to Mateta rather than Solanke out, or even João Pedro to Jackson, or potentially taking a big punt in midfield and going Gordon to Son. Or if you really want to get the cash to do like 2 of those moves, you could take out Gabriel to a cheaper defender and have even more money to spend. So I look at this team here. It's always easier to say this when you're not actually having to wildcard, but I'm fairly certain Trent, Munoz, Gabriel... No, actually, let's discount Gabriel because you might want to go a bit cheaper. Trent, Munoz, Sarr, Salah, Palmer, Isak, Valdemarson just because he's cheap, probably Rodgers because I got him at 5 million, Mikalenko for the double, and a Fulham defender would almost certainly be in my final draft. So that's 10 of the 15 picks. It's just the 2 forwards, the Gordon spot, and Gabriel, I would say. And maybe the goalkeeper if you've already used your triple captainship. They're maybe the ones that I wouldn't be so sure about. But really, you're only picking between a couple of players in each position. If you don't go Alisson, you're probably going Pickford, for example. Anyway, like I said earlier, I've put this together quite quickly because it's Christmas. Quick turnaround between game weeks 18, 19. But I wanted to get something out ahead of the deadline. Good luck with your wild card if you're using it this week. Whether you are or aren't, I'll see you on the deadline stream at 11 a.m.